Hey everyone, here we are. We're in Bangkok. So, want to just talk about, why we decided to do this, why we wanted to go to Thailand, and really all the work that was put into it. I mean, it's easy to say let's just jump on a plane and go, which is what my buddy did. But there's actually a lot of work that goes into it. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a breakdown of all the things that we needed to do, some of the things that we learned the hard way, including almost not getting into the country. So I just want to go through a complete list. So if you're thinking of traveling during a global pandemic, my suggestion is don't for a lot of reasons. One, obviously, the big one with the health concerns and whatnot. We don't need to get into that. Or why we ultimately decided there's a lot of reasons behind it, but it's very difficult to travel these days, as I'm sure you're probably aware. So we're Canadian, so things we had to do to get in order before flying over here to Thailand. So the first thing you want to do is create a list and be organized. Now, if you know me, you know that's not really my strong point. So that that's the biggest thing, is to figure out, all right, what are all the things that we needed to get in order. So the first thing we did, and I'll put a bunch of links in the description here below, just some resources if you're thinking of traveling, what you need to do. So first thing you have to do is be let into the country. So what we did is we decided to check out the Thai embassy online. So they have all sorts of different requirements. So depending on the type of visa you're looking to get or how long you're planning on staying, you might not even need a visa. So the first thing we did is we decided we wanted to stay for a little bit longer, because obviously with what's going on with COVID, there is a 2 week mandatory lockdown or quarantine, I should say. So make sure you do your research to understand what's going on. Initially, we actually wanted to go to Vietnam, but the borders were closed. So, figure out what needs to be done with, local health restrictions, national health restrictions, what's going on, obviously, in Canada and Saskatchewan, where we're from, obviously had an impact on how we plan this. So, first thing we had to do was we had to apply for a visa. Now, there was a whole list of things before we could even apply for a visa. So, the embassy's recommendation is to do at least 15 days prior. I would strongly recommend that. We maybe started planning on the 15th. There's a life event that unfortunately happened with me that kind of skyrocketed this plan. So first thing we did was looked at all the things that we needed to do. So there's a whole list of things you have to do. So one of them is you have to book an alternative stay quarantine hotel. So there's a whole list of hotels that you can stay. We're at the Prince in Bangkok, and you're required to stay there for 15 days. So far, it was a very interesting process actually getting in here and getting allowed into the hotel. So once we arrived, you have to go through every airport that you go through, and we went from Regina, Saskatchewan, to Vancouver, BC, to Tokyo, then to Bangkok. And at each airport, you had to present documents, basically just to even be allowed on the flights. And then once you got to Bangkok, they did some health screening. You have to go through customs and a lot of things that you have to have with you to even be let in at all entry points, essentially. So make sure you keep your documents. We booked 15 days. Now, when we got here, it was very interesting. So we were in a van. It was me and my friend, and then one other older gentleman. And he said to me, he says, I plan on staying here. I've been in Thailand since March. He said, it's kind of fun not having a plan, which is something that generally I don't really do, even at the best of times. And so he said, he's planning on staying here. And who knows what's in store for us. But when we got on the van, what happened is they drive you to the hotel, and then it probably took about 15-20 minutes just to ask a bunch of questions. What's your height, your weight, what's your religion, all these different types of things were asked. And then they basically walked you to your hotel room. There was no check-in. They basically led you to your room, and that was it. They kind of just had the TV on, you had all your bags were taken for you, and you're not supposed to leave your room for the next uh, 7 days until you get your first negative COVID test. Then you're allowed 40 minutes outside. So what they do is they actually have a whole menu for your entire stay. So they do provide you with 3 full meals every day for the duration of your stay. So you can put in your meal. I feel like this is what prison would be like. Is you just get delivered meals to your room. They're hit and miss. I mean, some of the meals are pretty good, and some of them aren't. I mean, obviously, if you leave them and they're cold, they're not so great, which unfortunately happened to us our first night because we are kind of delayed. Um, and yeah, and obviously because you're in quarantine, there's nobody that comes in and makes your bed or fixes your room. So you're basically just locked in a hotel room till the foreseeable future. Uh, Next thing you have to do is you have to book flights. So in order to book flights, you have to basically prove that you have a place to stay. We got pretty good deal. One way flight I think was like $660. The flights, or sorry, the hotel was probably the biggest expense. I think that was around $1,600 a person. And then, of course, you have to prove that you had a negative COVID test. Now, not only did you have to get a negative COVID test, but you also had to have COVID insurance. So you have to have up to $100,000 in COVID insurance in order to travel. So for us, we are planning to stay probably around 90 days. That's what our visa allows us to do. So for that, it was about $200 or so, 200 and some to get the COVID insurance. And then you needed health insurance as well. So you needed $400,000 in outpatient and 40,000 in inpatient, or maybe the other way around. I'm not really sure. Uh, but there's a whole list of providers that they give you for all of this. So for the insurance, they give you approved providers. For the hotels, they give you approved hotels. The medical insurance was about $350. If you want an international driver's license, you can get one of those as well. Going through CAA seems to be the best, or I think only way to get an international driver's license. That's pretty cheap. I think that's around $40. And then where are you going to live beyond the quarantine? So we just did an Airbnb. This was probably the easiest part, but it actually also provided us with the most problems and almost caused us not to get in the country actually. So we booked an Airbnb for 3 months for the entire. I think it was 70 some days we booked, and because we also had the 2 weeks at the hotel, so for the entire 70 some days for the Airbnb, it was $1,100, and that's for two of us. So that's pretty cheap when you add that up. That's about $200 a person to live in Thailand for close to 3 months. And we're thinking about if we want to stay longer, obviously we need a steady income. So there's two things you could do. If you have a job that allows you to work remotely, you could do that, but keep in mind there's a time difference. So for me, it's a 13-hour difference between my local time and time over here in Bangkok. So something to consider prior to moving is, what are you going to do with your job, or are you going to look for work when you get over here? And then, of course, you can't bring everything. So, what are you going to do with your possessions? So for us, we just sold all our bigger stuff, brought the stuff that we really wanted, gave up. We both just rent as of right now. So we gave up our leases and sold a bunch of stuff on Facebook Marketplace. Now, if you're familiar with Facebook Marketplace, man, that's aggravating. That's just, okay, I'm done with that. Don't want to talk about Facebook Marketplace because there's some grifters on that site. And then what are you going to do with your larger stuff? So for me, like, what am I going to do with my car? So luckily, my wonderful mother allowed me to store it at her place while I'm gone for the winter. If you live in a cold climate, obviously something to consider. And then, of course, just your everyday essentials. What are you going to do with your phone? What are you going to do with your bank account? How are you going to get out money? How are you going to make phone calls? When we were at the airport, my buddy almost didn't get let in. And of course, we don't have Thai cell phone numbers, so we didn't have our phones on uh, SMS, and we were just relying on Wi-Fi, which we both had issues. We both tried calling each other because there was about an hour or 2 hours where we didn't know each other, where each other were. And if you come to Bangkok during the pandemic, there's no way you can get lost because there's about 150 employees that tell you everywhere to go. So we're gonna talk to my buddy and find out exactly what happened there. Because normally you could get a lot of these supplies at the airport. You know, if you need a power converter, because they use different voltage over here. If you need a SIM card, normally you can just get it at the airport, but because of the limits on travel, a lot of that stuff is closed. So we still don't have that. They actually don't allow you to do that because they require you to be there in person. So we can't actually get a Thai cell phone or a Thai cell phone number until our stay is done. And one of the biggest things that caused our problems with the Airbnb is we didn't have the address of the place we're staying. So two problems we had is when we initially sent off our visa application to the Thai consulate, they said our names weren't on the Airbnb as well as the address. So when we actually arrived in Bangkok, that's what caused my friend to be held back at security, is because we didn't actually have an address, but we weren't provided one. So, make sure we learned that the hard way. Make sure you have an address, make sure you have everything you need because people are going to ask to prove these things. So, once we had all this, then we sent it all off to the embassy. So, these are the first things we had to do. And then, of course, we had all these different things that we had to do once we received them. So, we sent this off for approval. Now, here's another challenge. The Thai embassy, due to COVID, only 3 days a week. So if you're not planning this 2 weeks in advance or even further, you can have some major problems. Now, here's the biggest thing: is you also have to take a negative COVID test, and you have to have a fit to fly medical certificate and a criminal record check. So all these things need to be sent to the embassy before you can even get your visa. Now, the problem is with only working 3 days a week, depending what day your flight's on, it can be very hard to get all the documents you need. And then, of course, you need a certificate of entry as well with all these documents. So the last 3 days were extremely stressful for us. The videos that you'll see in here will hopefully show you how stressed we were, and kind of the inspiration of why we decided to do this. But the next 14 days, not going to be super fun. I might go a little crazy. Hopefully, we can do some fun stuff with some of the YouTubers. If you're friends with me on Snapchat, you see some of the stupid stuff I do when I'm alone in my kitchen. So we might do some of that here in the hotel room. So if you need anything, I put a lot of resources in the description. If you're ever interested in what it's like to come over to Thailand, what you need, and yeah, it's a lot of work. So, in short, if you're thinking of traveling during a pandemic, my recommendation would be no, don't do it. Wait if you can. If you got other things going on in life, I mean, something I'm very passionate about is mental health, and I think for both of us, part of the reason we're leaving is unfortunately, there's a couple of things in our life that aren't going super well, and I think there's a conversation that needs to be had around that. Maybe it's not suited for this video or this channel, or maybe it is. Who knows? But anyway, what I wanted to do is give you a little bit of an idea of what it's like to travel to Thailand during a pandemic. Funny thing, if you notice, I said I was, I want to shave. I brought about 50 razor blades, but I forgot my razor. So I have the blades. I just have nothing to. Maybe I'll use my hand. You think if I use shaving cream and I just use my finger and I just use the blade without the handle, how long do you think that would take me to shave? Maybe we'll film that. Maybe that will be my next video. Got nothing else to do.